can see some really, really clear evidence to this difficulty, especially in the divorce rate over the past 60 years. It's blown up gargantuan to where even in the church now, the roles are no longer clear. The responsibilities of each individual part, there's so much confusion therein. And I think that it is something that needed to be challenged. But when something is challenged, it's not challenged with care. And we see that a lot today, is that this bath is horrible, throw the baby out with the bath water. Let's just get rid of this whole thing. And that's a big movement and a big problem in America today.
There are those who believe in the traditional ideals of dating, which is the idea of complementarianism, whereas men have a traditional role, women have another traditional role, and together they complement one another. Whereas those that believe in more progressive dating ideals, that there are no traditional roles. It doesn't matter if the woman or the man is the breadwinner. As long as we love each other, that's all that matters. So my question then would be, has the role of manhood changed in relationships?
I personally like tradition, and I like chivalry and stuff like that. That's what I like. I'm not trying to put that on anybody else, and I think that a woman can go out and do the same exact thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if a woman opens up the door at Quick Trip for me, it's great. It's awesome. Like, I thank them and I go about my day. It's just fun. As far as men, like, in general, being irresponsible, then women need to just not go after that, right? Like, there are quite a few good dudes out there, and like, if you're not attracted to somebody that's driving a loud motorcycle blaring music down the street, or somebody that has no money or job, then leave them be. Those people will, like, Darwin will figure it out, right, in society.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important, that pretty much people mostly just kind of need to mind their business and what's going to occur, or what's going to be part of their lives, and leave other people to their own devices. Unless it infringes on something important, just, respect others and mind your business to the best that you can.
I think dating culture in America is changing for the most part, and I don't know if it's good or bad yet. Should men still pay on dates? If the gentleman feels comfortable to wanting to pay, and if the female is okay with, or the lady's okay with that, I say yeah. If she wants to split it, I also say that's fine. I'm on the side of Ben. I think chivalry is important, but I think like chivalry may be changing what the definition is. My fiance and I met on a dating app, and for her, what stood out that I was different is that I made a reservation for dinner, and I was intentional about calling it a date instead of just let's hang out. I think our culture, I think all of us are from a different culture where we ask the girl out on a formal date. Where today it's kind of like, let's chill, let's vibe, let's get to know each other. And I say these words having no idea of what they mean, most of them. And I think it's just a cultural shift to what we grew up with. Like, if you liked a girl, you went through the nervous wreck of asking her out. I question if Saydee Hawkins' dance are going to be more normal in the future, where the girls are asking the guys, just to go against the old culture of guys asking girls. I don't know if it's a bad or good thing. It depends. Have you ever? So this is a question I kind of want to pose. Is like, the weird culture that girls go on dates just to get free meals, is that considered bad? I've never met a girl that's like that, but I've heard stories. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to view that one.
Yes, because it's happened to me before. I can vouch for that. She got a free meal out of it, and it's a long story. But yeah, I can vouch for that. It does still happen. But men have had the honor and privilege of being the leader and provider of the household. It's something that was given to us by God. That was the role He instituted for men. And the fact that cultural norms and mores have been eroded on different fronts, especially today's day and age. It's mostly been the feminist front, a radical feminist front. And really it kind of starts with the destructuring of the nuclear family. We think of the man's role in the house and the woman's role in the house. Well, we just destructure the nuclear family that's been present for so long, then yeah, everyone's role is up in the air. Redefine your own role. That's what a lot of women nowadays are being told. Like, redefine your own role. They're more encouraged now to, and kind of even pushed by society to build a career, achieve financial freedom, independence from child rearing. Go out and be your own woman. Like, don't depend on your husband. Don't let him force you to have kids. Like, that will interfere with your career. Like, don't do that. That's what women are being told nowadays. And so their entire role has changed. Same as the man's role has changed. He's not the sole provider anymore. It's, half income is used comes from the woman sometimes, or sometimes the woman is out earning the man nowadays. So yeah, roles have been redefined just as much as the definition of a family has been redefined in today's day and age. And you have the egalitarianism against complementarianism, and egalitarianism deals with that the roles are equal. Like, you have your half, I have my half. Roles are completely equal. No one is, it's supposed to say no one is greater than the other, but everything is kind of up in the air with egalitarianism, where complementarianism is more, each role has it's a definite thing. Men have this role, women have this role. It doesn't make one more valued than the other, but they complement each other. That's kind of how God designed men and women, is to complement each other, not to rival each other, not for a power struggle amongst each other, but to complement each other. But society nowadays is very egalitarianism. We see that in society, you see it in corporate, we even see that in the church nowadays. So many women in leadership roles in the church, and it makes you scratch your head, like, why do women have such a role in the church when it's specifically commanded that women are not supposed to be pastors, women are not supposed to be elders, and yet somehow we're okay with women having these leadership. I mean, 1 Timothy 2 talks about it, Titus talks about it, but that's culture. It's seeped into every aspect, even the church nowadays. We've kind of lost the sense of whose role is which. It's completely up in the air. Up is down now. Left is right.
Yeah, Chris, I think that's a really good point, especially the bit about women in roles of leadership in the church. Like, that's something that I really wrestle with, because my culture tells me that absolutely they should have every opportunity to pursue anything that they want. But I think that just understanding the psychology of man from God's perspective, that it sort of makes sense to challenge that a little bit, and that it's difficult for men to submit or even rival with women. And that makes the position of a woman senior pastor or elder in the church. I don't know about the elder in the church position necessarily, but the woman as a senior pastor, I don't actually outright have a problem with that. But I know that I haven't been able to receive the words of a woman pastor as well. For whatever reason, maybe it's a subconscious thing of my own, but I just haven't enjoyed the message of women pastors. And that's nothing against women pastors. I just haven't seen it yet. But when men are required to rival against women instead, it creates animosity, or rather striving in the relationship, and it confuses the roles that you talked about. And I think that we can see some really, really clear evidence to this difficulty, especially in the divorce rate over the past 60 years. It's blown up gargantuan to where even in the church now, the roles are no longer clear. The responsibilities of each individual part, there's so much confusion therein. And I think that it is something that needed to be challenged. But when something is challenged, it's not challenged with care. And we see that a lot today, is that this bath is horrible, throw the baby out with the bath water. Let's just get rid of this whole thing. And that's a big movement and a big problem in America today. So I think that you bring up some really, really good points. I guess I want to kind of give my vote to what you've said there.
I mean, when you think of it, just from my experience doing ministry in North Dakota, one of the biggest things that I noticed at the church there it was the women that came to church with their Bibles. The men didn't. It was the women that were part of the prayer team. The men weren't. And that's given way to women taking power from men in the churches, because there aren't enough strong men in the church to stand up and take leadership roles, which now has forced women to usurp their role that God has given them and take a man's role in the church. And it's something that was brought to my attention is in Genesis 3, it talks about the curse that God put on the serpent, the man, and the woman. And it's interesting that to the woman, he says that your desire shall be for your husband. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. He has taken the woman and pretty much because she sinned, she has a desire that's contrary to her husband. She wants to take power from her husband. She wants that authority to make those decisions. And yet he says, your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Now, does that mean rule with an iron fist? No, but it means the husband is to be in the leadership over the woman. And you try and tell that in today's day and age, and you'll get burned at the stake and tarred and feathered. But the roles of men and women isn't something that comes from culture. That's what feminism misses, is they say, well, these are cultural roles. They've been there for thousands of years. And no, they've been from the very beginning when God first made man and woman. He established these roles right off the bat. And because of sin, the roles kind of been changed. Women want power from men. Men don't know how to lead their women. That's really describes what society is and why we have these issues between men and women nowadays.
I think I'm quite a bit farther left than you, Chris, on this topic. I'm not sure that okay, you can go back to Paul's letters, right? And I have a hard time with this whole thing. I mean, this goes into a theological, biblical argument, right? I just have a hard time thinking that you can take small examples of letters that Paul wrote and apply them today. I also believe that the Bible is the written word of God, but at the same time, I focus a lot more on what Christ did when he was alive than on what Paul wrote in letters to churches at the time. Because each church was so different. He tackled different issues with different churches. And I don't know, I just have a hard time accepting that just because he said in Timothy that women shouldn't be pastors or leaders in the church, have a tough time accepting that should be applied to every church. And I personally find no reason other than, I mean, that's a good reason, if depending on what you think, depending on what you personally believe applies with Timothy, or what Paul is saying. But I personally don't put as much emphasis on that, and I think that Christ did have some pretty great leaders that were women that followed along with him, and I personally have no, like Tyler said, like sometimes women pastors I have a hard time connecting with, but I've also not connected with men pastors too. Like, that's no reason for me to say that women shouldn't be pastors. There's some really great ones out there that I know, and they're very good leaders. I think this is where I have a fairly liberal idea of men and women, no matter like what role you're in, like men and women, like depending on the person, are going to be so much better at certain things than others. And I think it's my opinion that in the church, like either somebody's a good pastor or they're not, and it's like, or like somebody, like if your church is big enough to have multiple pastors, like you can hire two people, no matter if they're a man or a woman, that complement each other great. So I don't know. I guess so. I disagree with you that we should put so much emphasis on the Timothy thing, but I do see where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm. I want to quick jump in there if I can. I'm not familiar with the Greek necessarily, but in my ESV and my NIV, it does say specifically that Paul is the one who says this, and he doesn't say that this is an ordination from God, that this has been given to him necessarily as a revelation from God. He says, I cannot abide this. And beyond that, I think that there is a really good case to be made for the idea of the culture of that time frame. It was incredibly patriarchal, right? Men were the head in every aspect of Roman, Greek, and Jewish culture. And so it could be that this was Paul's personal opinion on this. And whether that is or is not, I think that that's kind of mincing the point. Ultimately, I think, Ben, you're right on point with saying that what matters is how good of a pastor they are and how good of a leader they are. And the fact that they're women should have no bearing on it. But I can also make a very good point in saying that the natural order as handed down by God as men having headship, and as Jesus holding the high point, the high priest position of the church, is that sort of transference is going to be easier to receive generally across a universal population. And so women shouldn't be disallowed from being pastors, but that it's going to be harder for some to receive their word. And speaking just of my own experience, I have never encountered a woman pastor who have enjoyed her message. So you saying that there are some who are great, I'd love to listen to it, because it's just not something that I've encountered yet. And I've only seen half a dozen speak, and it's all been in person. But as you have said, I've also seen a lot of men who I really have not liked their messages. Specifically comes to mind our dear friend Joel Osteen. I'm not a fan. And there's just a lot of different theologies out there that I just will not adhere to. But I think that whole point of the nature of humans and the nature, sort of, as Chris, you were talking about it, the curse. I think that's something that speaks to the nature of the relationship between men and women, just communally on earth.
I see Tyler and Chris's point of view. I think Chris, I was fair to say you're on one spectrum for the most part, and then Ben, I think you're on the other, and I think Tyler, you're right in the middle a little bit. And for me, what I really struggle, I think culture is bleeding into the church, where I don't think it should, and I don't think it's really encouraging. And I think that in some ways churches are bending over backwards to show that they're not unloving or ununderstanding or unkind towards women, especially in positions of leadership. Like, I think a lot of us would affirm that both men and women have been created in the image of God and are entitled to privileges and to be held accountable, responsible, or responsibilities that come from reflecting our Creator. I think we would all say that's true, every single one of us, hopefully, in this conversation. We deny that either gender has been given or entitled to greater dignity in society, the home, the church, or even the kingdom of God. So I'm just reading, these are outlines made by a really big pastor that I like, Mike Chandler. I think that he helped me kind of define my viewpoints on how to speak on the subject with love. And he's way better, smarter man than I am. I think we affirm that both men and women are needed and are necessary for the health and ministry of the church. Godly men and women should be visible partners in the corporate life of church, deploying their divinely given gifts for the good of the body. Simply put, all Christians add to the ministry of the church. And then they say, we deny that the church can flourish without brotherly and sisterly partnership. We deny that the church can exist in which men flourish and women don't, and vice versa. And then this is a subject I think we're really on. The role and function of elders is reserved for qualified men, and elders are distinctly responsible for overseeing the church and preaching the word. But by saying that, we deny that the role of elder being withheld from women, that it diminishes their importance or their influence. It does not mean that it diminishes their importance or their influence in the church. Women were created to give and should be excited in all manners of the roles of office in the church, except for those reserved for qualified men. We confirm that all members of the church should be glad to submit to the elder body, and that all should be glad and sacrificial submission to the leadership of Jesus Christ, the head of the church. We deny that all women are subject to the leadership and authority of all men. Furthermore, biblical submission is not meaning that there's inequality as seen in the son's submission to the father. And so within that, I think the growing notion that female pastors are becoming more and more, I think it's a reflection of the culture saying that men and women, there is no difference between them. They can both do the same job and they can both do the same role. And within that, I think as Christians, we're very loving, and we are described that the world will see us by how loving we are with one another. And I think that in that sense is leading to more women preaching. I think, but at the same time, Ben, I agree with you. There are some men who preach and teach that shouldn't teach. If teaching is one of the fruits of the Spirit, that means that all believers have the ability to be good teachers and preachers. But at the same time, I think Chris made a good argument in 1 Timothy, Titus, Peter, and even in, you go to the beginning, the Genesis creation story. Why is it Adam was held responsible for what Eve did, even though Eve was the one that did it? God directly asked Adam what happened. Like, in some sense, he was given headship over her. Christ is considered to be the headship of us as the church, and he's a male position, and he's a reflection of God, for fully man and fully God. So how do people argue that? And some men are going to have to really argue with being the bride in that sense, in their masculinity, and admit that as a church we're called to be a feminine role, in which is considered to be submitting. I think our culture is really affecting us on how we answer this question, and I think we are giving a little bit of compromise and to be loving. I don't think any of us are chauvinistic or depressed or subjugating women. I'm an avid believer that women are our sisters, in Christ. There are partners in the flourishing of the church, and that, in my viewpoint about when it comes to honoring women, even in dating, like you have to think about this is the daughter of the king. You better treat her well. Like she is the daughter of a living God, and your way that you treat her and interact with her better be honorable, because you're going to be held accountable. And then even for so. I don't really know what to do, but I if we answer that men and women have roles laid out by Scripture, I think our society is telling us that those roles need to change. And then the question is, as believers, what are we going to do about that? How are we going to stay united? As Christ prayed in the garden that we be united as him and the Father was. He showed us what submission to leadership looked like to God. And so how are we going to submit to the Word of God, but without losing the convictions of what the Scriptures tell us? So, yeah.
I think we're seeing the raising women pastors. I would imagine, and it'll be interesting for you, James, to talk to women about it. But I would imagine more women would relate to women pastors better than men. I would think it'd be really interesting to learn about that. But I think it goes back to a huge problem of the church not being very welcoming of men too. Like there's a more wild side to men, and there's also a super badass side to the Bible that is just skipped over and not focused on. Like, I don't know, like feminism in the church is more attractive. Like God is love is and that's it, is more attractive sometimes, but at the same time it's, I don't know, like church men's groups hardly exist anymore. Like we tried to do some stuff in Perham, and it was just older guys that showed up, like retirement age guys. So given our church was a lot of retirement age people, but like there'd be women with their kids, and the fathers or their husbands wouldn't even show up to church just because they weren't interested in it. You know, we have to do a better job as like just to show strength as Christians, and to show that Christ wasn't a weenie, right? Because that's not, like, again, I believe that men and women are, like, think a little differently, and in general, men are a lot more aggressive. Men just think like that a little more, and they don't want to come into church necessarily and hear, like, God is love, don't question it, or like, this is the Bible, don't question it. And I've met women are the same way, a lot of them, but I think we have to change the representation of men before we can insist on having just men being leaders in the church. I think.
So, Ben, question: do you think Jesus would be considered masculine toxicity in today's culture?
As far as we know, Jesus was pretty freaking respectful of anybody. I don't think, did he? I don't know if he treated anybody differently. Do you guys know?
I'm playing the other side's advocate. He picked 12 men.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, when you think of the very beginning, I believe it's John, when he talks about the wedding ceremony that Jesus was invited to, and how they ended up running out of wine, and his mom comes up to him and says, Jesus, they're out of wine. And Jesus' response would not go over well with the culture nowadays when he says, woman, why do you bother me with this?
Jesus was brave.
That would not go over very well. But he said it, as bad as it sounds in English and compared to today's culture, we have to remember the way he said woman back then was endearment to his mom. Not as a, well, you don't have a name, you're just woman. Woman, bring me a sandwich. Woman, come here. no, that's not how Jesus said it at all. It was a endearment to his mom, is the way he said it.
Saying, "Hey, Ma, why do I need to worry about that? Probably a good thing that everybody's not going to get hammered anyway." No, I don't know. Yeah, he picked 12 men, but at the same time, like, nice thumbs up. That's great. He picked 12 men, but at the same time, that was the culture too. So, I mean, I don't know. I think you can stick to your guns with what it says in the Bible too, like, and that's not a bad argument to me. It's not at all, because I mean, it's the Bible, right? But at the same time, they're quite a bit different now than they were then. So I'm not of the opinion that you need to take every verse of the Bible and set it in stone with how you interpret it. But I don't know. It's a tough conversation to have. It's really interesting. You guys are making great points.
It's very difficult, and for me, it's the two camps of like, well, that was true for that culture back then. It's like, but Jesus transcends that culture. He speaks to us directly today. So it's I think it's our culture bleeding into our theology and our ethos for how we live. And I think we're making compromises. I don't think we really need to, one. And two, I think we can be loving in how we say, if we can say that men and women are both created in God's image and are equal but have distinct roles, what is wrong with that towards church leadership as well?